Now, I'm Tracy Hayes, and now we're recording. Rodney founded LGBT History Month in 1994, and in that year became the first openly gay public school teacher in Missouri. In 2020, he was named a Missouri Trailblazer by the Missouri State Museum. And his story is told in a short documentary called Taboo Teaching, a profile of Missouri teacher Rodney Wilson, which is, we're going to start with watching that. It's a 27-minute, and then after that, you'll be able to ask questions. And Rodney will talk as well. And now I'm going to let Rodney introduce himself.
Thank you, Tracy. Very happy to be here at SWIC today, and I very much look forward to hearing the responses and questions that everyone will have when we finish with the documentary. Thank you again.
Thank you. So I'm going to mute my mic here. I'm only telling you that so I remember to do it. That means when I go to talk to Rodney, everybody remind me to unmute my mic. Okay, now we can get rid of this. Where is it at? Where? Oh, it's right there. That's green. I know we practice. That does not mean anything. All right.
Now, moving on to other news, a gay teacher speaks out tonight after he's verbally vilified at a school board meeting.
An openly gay teacher is at the center of a curriculum controversy that involves the role of gays and lesbians in history.
5 months ago, 29-year-old Rodney Wilson shocked a lot of people when he told some of his classes he's gay.
Teacher in a Melville public school who told his class that he was a homosexual. We're talking about Melville Public School, or he's a polygamist, or he's a pedophile, or whatever. This is totally
That's right.
inappropriate.
And that was bad taste and bad judgment on the part of the teacher. He should have been reprimanded or maybe fired. I don't know.
They don't want gays teaching their kids, playing with their kids, or even occupying the same room with their kids.
Coming up, could this history teacher be history because he came out of the closet in class? Do gay teachers belong at the head of the class?
I don't want a queer within a mile of me. That's something I heard my dad say a lot in the 1970s when I was a boy. He also warned me to stay away from a particular player on his softball team that he thought might be queer. And I remember the Anita Bryant 1977 Save Our Children campaign in Florida. What I took away from that controversy was, to me, a frightening understanding that a lot of people thought that gay people were dangerous, especially around children. The next year, the Briggs Initiative out in California, which was specifically about gay and lesbian people and if they should be allowed to teach in public school, sent the same message into my 13-year-old brain. Gay people are so dangerous, they should not be in a classroom. So I took all of these awful lessons with me into an otherwise good high school experience in the early 1980s, but I knew that something terrible about me had to remain hidden. I was somehow damaged or broken, and there was one thing I knew for sure: gay people could never be teachers. Room number 115 when I was here, 1990, 97. Now it looks like it's 216. Right out of college, yeah. For any teacher, the first year, it's overwhelming. It looks a lot smaller than I remember it. The windows I had were rusty and old. This wonderful quadrangle out here was just a bunch of cars parked all day.
My first impression of Mr. Wilson was that he was young and he was very exciting to listen to.
We did not have internet, we did not have Google, we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones. I had a simple projector with transparencies that I would use. I wanted to do so well. I wanted to make my students excited. I wanted to help change the world by being a teacher.
He wanted to do projects and presentations, and so trying to tie it into what things were going on in our lives today, or at that time.
I mean, it was very engaging for sure. Interacted with his kids all the time. I mean, His classroom was always full of things for kids to look at and be involved in, and just bringing life into his subject matter.
Well, the first thing you're trying to do is, of course, capture their attention and keep their attention. I was always trying to get the students to understand that history was about something that was real and meaningful and even pertinent to their lives today.
One example of that, he had us recreate protest posters from the 50s, 60s, 70s to kind of help the story come alive.
The poster project was something I did near the end of every year, in which I would have students redesign actual protest posters.
Make us feel a little bit more like we were there, maybe what it might have been like to be protesting that particular event in time. So it really brought us into the story.
They'd choose the ones they wanted to do, and they would have to make it look identical to the original. And then they would give a little presentation, say, here's the poster, and this is the time period, this is what the poster was about.
He did a lot with current events, and that was a big part of the classroom. He wanted us to read the newspaper and read Newsweek, and encouraged us to have subscriptions to those at our houses so that we were always kind of up to date. And I know that he also encouraged us to watch programs on PBS, not things that typical freshmen in high school would watch, but, you know, hey, watch this and, you know, write something about it.
So I think it was over 2 class periods, we had watched a movie, Escape from Sobibor, and talking about concentration camps, obviously, and the different people in them. And once the movie was over, we had had a discussion in class. I remember it very distinctly. I was in the front and he sat pretty much right to my right, and went through one of the many posters in the classroom that had examples of different patches that people were imprisoned with and branded with in the concentration camps. One of them happened to be a pink triangle, and he just kind of casually slipped it in there that had he been in that vicinity at the time, he would have been branded with that patch. And then kind of paused and let that sink in for a moment. And we got it, but did we hear that? Is that what happened?
He had given us a paper that had listed all the different patches that people would wear if they were Jewish, if they were a gypsy, if they had a disability, if they were homosexual. And he said, you know, we're all sitting there and we're looking at, you know, this paper, and I remember him saying, if I would have been in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, I would have had a pink triangle on my coat. And so, of course, you know, we all look at our paper like, pink triangle, you know, and I think everybody just was like, we felt like, well, we thought we knew him, you know, for so long, and then this was kind of this really, you know, for that time and for us in his classroom, kind of earth-shattering.
At that time period, people didn't really know how to react, didn't know what to say, and that includes faculty, staff, and the students. So I would say there's a lot of uncertainty as to how the community would accept, and quite frankly, how some of the faculty and staff would accept.
We do not need this in our school. This is not quality education, and this has no value at all for our children.
Rodney Wilson is a history teacher here who told his students that if he were alive during Hitler's Germany, he would have been persecuted by the Nazis because he is a homosexual.
Yeah, and it became a big deal, and I remember in the beginning the students kind of were a little bit taken aback, a little bit surprised, some didn't care, some probably got angry, and I heard from other people that there had been angry letters or mean things slipped under his door or whatnot. But the parents, I guess, there was an uproar about that, and it became a much larger scandal than it needed to be, and it really blew up.
And if you have a Bible, I ask you to read 1 Corinthians, and it'll tell you it is not right. The alternative lifestyle that they speak about is not a natural alternative lifestyle. It's an unnatural lifestyle.
I grew up in a Southern Baptist home that I thought, well, that's it. He's going to hell. I mean, he just told me.
There was, at that time, quite a variety of things being said in the teachers' workroom. Some people, and I would say most teachers actually were very supportive. But of course, you always had teachers that were, I can't believe a gay person is teaching in my school.
There was not a whole lot said, if I recall, officially, you know, through the chain of command or what have you, because I guess in a sense it was still a personnel issue, you know, so those kind of things you don't talk about with the other staff, kind of a thing, privacy, you know, sort of thing. But obviously something like that, at that time especially, was going to be news, one way or the other.
You cannot be honest to the historical record and not say in the 1960s, when all of these other groups of Americans began to agitate for their constitutional rights, their God-given rights, you cannot do that and leave out one group simply because that might be considered controversial or it might bring on inconvenience.
With some of the other gay and lesbian teachers in our building, I think they were really concerned about acceptance. It was almost like don't ask, don't tell, to be honest with you, in the Melville School District at that time period. And so whether you, as a teacher or as a student or as a community member, wanted to believe it or not, Rodney was the first person that had enough, I guess, guts to come out and say, this is who I am, and accept me for who I am.
We supported him. A lot of us were active in our NEA, so in our union, and that was a place where we tried to support him too, because what was happening we all felt was just not right.
If you're going back 20 years ago, no doubt it was, even though it's a public school, that religious overtone did make its way into Melville High School for sure back then.
I think the response from the parents depended on who they were and who their kids were and how the kids were responding. So,
it's not right, and my kids don't like it.
So if that group of kids was responding negatively, then the parents just kind of jumped on board.
I'm sure there were parents out there that believed, that, I can't have a gay person teach my son or daughter because they might turn gay and things like that. That kind of, I guess, scare tactic. But for the most part, what I really remember is more religious-based reasons and rationales why they did not want their son or daughter being taught by somebody that was gay or lesbian.
People back then sometimes equated, a lot of people, well, maybe some still do, but equated being gay with, potentially being like a child molester or something of that nature. It's like, well, I'm sure there was some of that and concern about what he was telling the students or talking, probably more of that than anything else.
And one of the reasons they're afraid of you is that you're a very good teacher, that you're going to somehow recruit them. That's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
I think the administrators, I don't know if they knew what to do, to be honest with you. I think they thought they were supposed to be behaving one way, but yet their personal views may have they wanted to maybe behave a different way. And so I think that is hard. That's probably why I don't want to be an administrator, because it's hard to live who you are, being put in this box of you're supposed to uphold these things that we think as a community are what you're supposed to be doing.
I now know that he had to go to the administration, he had to go to the board. I sit on a school board now in a neighboring district. Like, that would definitely have been something that you have to sit and talk about. And that your job's on the line at that point.
Here's central office, and that's where the board would meet. So from time to time there would be some pretty raucous meetings there with community members who were not impressed with what I had done. And in my last conversation with my father before he died in 2004, the very last conversation with him over the phone, he told me something that I had not known. He used to park here across Lee May Ferry with a gun, of course, because he was a countryman, and he would watch as I came out of school, usually parked right here. He would watch as I came out to make sure I got into my car safely and no one did anything to me.
I don't know if I was ever scared for Rodney. I think that's a before term, I think I was concerned for Rodney, but I also knew Rodney's character, and he was a strong man. And at the end of the day, I had no doubt that he would get through, whether it be parent-teacher night or whatever type of situation that was going to occur that school year.
And I remember there was a picture once I had to do, and I was sitting right here with all of this back behind me, and I was just wondering, okay, the media is interested in this, fine, but what does it do about my own employment and my own situation?
Now, school officials tell me that Wilson does have a contract to teach this year.
I don't remember how long after the coming out was that the media picked up on it.
It sounded like he was being sexual about it. Well, I think the issue at the time...
How can you not be sexual about saying I'm a homosexual?
It's no different than him talking about his... People expect teachers to talk about their frame of reference if they're married and the subject of marriage comes up.
Subject matter that is in the textbooks that kids don't know. We've gone crazy.
Do you mind...
in this country.
Okay, should a teacher not be able to tell his class that he's married?
No wonder our children are ignorant if that's what's being discussed in the classroom.
Absolutely.
I know I actually still, like a local paper called the Riverfront Times, I still have that to this day with him, my teacher, on the cover, and I was actually really, really proud of him. But he was on talk shows, he was on Dateline, and it was just crazy that all of this was coming out of such a minor event, what I thought should have been a minor event, but he was a pioneer.
What this teacher said to a classroom full of students could close the book on his career. How would you feel if your child were in his class?
So how would you feel if your child's teacher told the class that he was gay? For my next guest, revealing his sexuality to his classroom almost got him fired, until his own students fought to save his job.
I think it's a natural phenomenon for people to fear what they don't know.
And for me, being a young teacher as well, like I wanted to connect with my students any way that I could. And who cares what my background was? So who cares what anybody else's background was?
I remember being pretty adamant about what I believed at the time and writing something in a paper at the end of the school year, like, you know, the Bible says, this is what the Bible says. And I know about 5 years ago, I sent Rodney a message and just said, I'm really sorry because I don't believe that anymore. And she's like, I don't even remember you saying anything. But it was something that weighed on me for a really long time.
The granting of tenure was something a lot of us talked about for sure.
If my free speech is curtailed in the classroom, then the free speech of every other teacher in the Melville School District or in any other district, their free speech could be curtailed as well.
Especially with that NEA piece, with that union piece, people that were really active with that really were trying to protect his job. And honestly, in our district, I think people that are part of that NEA do get looked at as, we really shouldn't touch them because they knew we had a big voice. And we had a bigger voice back then, I think, as a union in the 90s. So I think he was kind of protected because of that in a way, and not that anything that happened was protecting him necessarily, but I think not losing his tenure was because of that group backing him.
I really think, you know, being a great teacher like Rodney was definitely helped him in the classroom and definitely helped, I don't know, save his job is a good way to put it, but maybe make it more difficult to get rid of Rodney, which became almost an impossibility.
The Melville School Board wins praise for protecting a history teacher's civil rights. The Melville teacher who told his students he's gay gets a tenured job in the South County District.
It's being called a victory for gays and lesbians tonight.
Although Wilson was reprimanded for discussing personal matters in class, he still feels it was appropriate.
I did not get fired.
When I hear about everything that Rodney went through, I find it hard to think about it still being at this school, because I came in on my first interview and I talked about my husband. In my first interview, I talked about him, and he's a tech director, and how he would be a benefit, and I knew that it wasn't something I was going to shrink back from.
When I hear about what Rodney went through, it makes me feel really good today about our teachers that can feel comfortable, and again, a place where they feel okay being out, being who they are, not having to feel like they have to hide anything.
I feel safe, I feel protected. I know I've always been open and honest with the administration, and they've always known who I am and who my partner is. And it's never been a concern or something that I felt would come back to me.
We've just grown on the fact that we accept people here. And I think as a teacher, I see that happen. And I work closely with kids in student council for sure. That's one thing I impress upon them always, is who cares what people associate with. It's who they are inside that matters.
Josie Talvey Goodman came to me and wanted to know if she could start a club for kids, and here we call it A Place for All.
It's the equivalent of GSA, which is Gay Straight Alliance. It's a group that houses the community for the LGBTQ community at our school.
As freshmen in high school, they're talking about being gay, about being lesbian, students that on the first day of class got up and introduced themselves as being transgender and stood there in front of the entire class of 35 students and welcomed any questions that they had.
One of the students who started the emails with teachers to communicate and just to introduce himself is a trans boy, and he went out for the boys tennis team and he was allowed to be on it, and he's the first trans anyone to ever be on a Melville sports team, which is really huge.
I think that shows a lot of progress over the past 14 years since I've been here.
It's important for me because I want all kids to feel comfortable at school. You can't learn if you don't feel comfortable, and you have to feel like it's a place you want to be. And it's really important to me that Josie's created a place where those kids want to come. It's one of the more popular clubs that's after school, that's not a sports club, meets on a regular basis, really good attendance, and they just feel comfortable. It makes the kids feel like they have a place of their own.
So he really made a point to stay the course and shine a light and say, I'm not going to back down. I am who I am. I'm not alone. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with me. And I respected him already. I respected him so much more. Respected him to this day.
Nothing is more rewarding than having a student who was in your classroom 25 years ago make contact with you again, which happens a lot now because of Facebook, and say, you did this or you said this, and I still remember it. It still has meaning in my life. It did make me a better person. And you don't even have any memory of that event at all. You don't have any idea what they're talking about because you're one teacher, and maybe in the course, for example, of my 7 years here, I might have had 1,000 students come through my classroom. So the teacher can't remember, but to know that the student remembers, yeah, is deeply meaningful. Or to have students come back who are gay, for example, who did not say that to anyone in 1996 at this school. There were no openly LGBT teachers or students in this school that I'm aware of. To have them come back and say, I actually was lesbian or gay, and knowing that you were there, knowing that someone could be open about who they are, even though I never said anything at the time, had great meaning and actually helped me get through my life.
These are the signs the Nazis used. Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexual. I wear this pink triangle because I'm gay.
What happened to you?
Well, I was reprimanded by the Central Office Administration. My coming out was called inappropriate classroom conduct.
Melville School District considers it inappropriate conduct for a teacher to discuss facts and beliefs of a personal nature in the classroom. Wilson fired back 28 pages of questions.
I asked them if a Polish person had said, as a Pole, I would have been among the persecuted groups, would that have been inappropriate classroom conduct? I asked them if a Jewish person had said that, would that have been inappropriate classroom conduct?
There were no answers. Instead, in early June, this letter from the school board's lawyers. The school district has no obligation to specifically respond to the questions and will not do so.
I think, honestly, he was so brave to do that, and it seems silly now. I guess it really doesn't, but that somebody would have to be considered brave to say such a simple thing about themselves. It shouldn't even be an issue, but at the time it still was, even in the mid-90s, and sometimes still is today, but he really paved the way for other people to be brave and come out themselves and to start a movement and to raise awareness about equality.
I want to read to you something that was in the Indianapolis Star newspaper, an editorial just a week ago, because this really upsets me. The celebration was the brainchild of Rodney Wilson, a gay high school teacher from St. Louis. What Wilson wanted in this October and every subsequent October was for public high schools to focus on a gay curriculum detailing the history of homosexual persecution and acknowledging the homosexuality of some historical figures. Parents should scream bloody murder at the first sign of a school in their district prepared to adopt this idea.
He kept speaking about it. He wouldn't give it up. He wanted to make it another LGBT History Month, just like there's Black History Month and Women's History Month, and any other minority group, they should be included.
Undo all of this. Give me 1 second. Unmute. So stop share. There we go. Can you hear me, Rodney?
Yes, Tracy.
Yay, I did it right. This is Rodney. I'm showing your picture to them. Do you have anything to say, Rodney? Yeah. I don't know what to do next. What are we going to do? Do you guys have questions for Rodney? Rodney, you want to talk a little?
Yeah, I would love to hear some comments or questions from anyone here on the Zoom call or there with you. Especially, I'm curious what like the under 25 crowd feel because all of these events happened, 27 years ago before they were even born. So yes, definitely. Patricia, do you have a question?
Go ahead, Patricia.
Yes, actually, I was very, to say the least, emotional hearing your story because I'm a 35-year-old, became a parent very young, and my 16-year-old came out to me just last year. And I had prepared myself for that day because ever since he was little, I picked up on it. It was just something that he was not like his other brothers. And unfortunately, his father has been absent. And when he came in the picture, his first question was, "Is your brother gay?" And his siblings were like, "Well, you gotta ask him." And he had the most disgusting things to say to his own son. The most vile things you can think of. He told his son, to the point where he was like, I regret shedding every tear I did when you were born. And you know, it affected me as a mother, but my son, on the other hand, he looks like unbothered. But that's his father. And you know, I asked him, are you okay? Is there, he seems okay. And I am glad that we're in a different world now, because thank God he's not going to be facing all of everything you did back in the days. And unfortunately, we come from a strong Catholic family too. And yes, some family has had issues with it, and it's been all over the place. But I stick behind him and I tell him he was born this way, and I can assure you guys that no one turned him. This is not a disease. You don't, it's just, there's so much that needs to be taught to us that are not familiar with it.
Yes, I think, Patricia, the most important thing that your son needs, he has, which is your unconditional love, support, and acceptance. He won't get that from everyone. It seems not even right now completely from his father, but he has that from you. So when he doesn't get unconditional love and acceptance from others, you will be that anchor, especially since he's only 16. You'll be that anchor that will let him know that these things are possible. I hope that over time, your husband will modify his views. Sometimes it does take fathers a bit longer than mothers, not always, and sometimes it's the other way around. But in my case, you know, my mother came to terms with everything within 24 hours, and it took my father about 6 months. So that will be my hope, that your husband, your former husband, or I should say the father of your son, yes, will come around. And I hope also that his older brother will be able to fully come around too, if he hasn't already, and give your child the love and support that he deserves. I hope too, wherever he's going to high school, that they have a GSA or some similarly organized effort there on the campus for the young people who identify as your son is identifying. That would also be a tremendous help for him. So I wish you and your child all the best. And I am happy it's a better time, but there are still pockets here and there of resistance. And over time, I hope we will outgrow those too. But for now, your son has your love, and that is the most important thing for a 16-year-old gay child.
That's awesome.
Does anyone, and I wish you all the best. And does anyone else have a comment or question?
I have a question.
Okay, Jennifer.
Now, at the time of the backlash after you had come out, did you imagine yourself to be such a catalyst for change? Did you see fight in yourself that was going to go on and on? Is the initial fight kind of what inspired you to continue doing what you're doing?
I knew, of course, that I could not predict the aftermath of being honest with my students and colleagues. But I felt so strongly that if I wanted to live a fully integrated, healthy life where I didn't compartmentalize, I had to come out. And therefore it happened. I knew there would be consequences. I didn't quite know what they would be. I was glad when there was media interest for two reasons. One, I felt that gave me some protection because the school district would be less likely to do the wrong thing if they were aware that they could not do the wrong thing in darkness. And secondly, I felt strongly that the issue of LGBT students and teachers in education was important, and we needed to have a conversation about it. And the media was providing the vehicle through which conversation was happening. So I was pleased for those two reasons that media was involved. And I felt a strong responsibility, even a burden sometimes, that I had to succeed. I had to get a 5th-year contract. I had to get a 6th-year tenured contract, because if I didn't, every teacher who was watching the situation and every student who was watching the situation would be affected. LGBT teachers would be that much less likely to be honest. LGBT students would be that much less likely to feel good about themselves and that there's a place for them in the world. And non-LGBT teachers and students who oppose gay rights would be emboldened. So I felt a very strong sense of responsibility in order to succeed and accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. In terms of history, I myself have spent a lot of my life, I think, trying to find grounding and find my place. And history has been one means for me, an important means of doing that. Family history, national history, world history. And it was natural, therefore, when I fully accepted that there be, I knew it was important that there be an LGBTQ History Month, then called Lesbian and Gay History Month, because I think history provides a foundation from which we can build our lives and grow. And I think it also provides a sense of empowerment when you recognize that you're not alone now, and you have never been alone. There have always been people in all times and places and cultures who had similar feelings, similar concerns, worries, anxieties, similar experiences. I think that's really empowering, generally about history, but here particularly about the history of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender Americans and citizens of the world. So it was natural for me to get sustenance from history and therefore to believe it was important, as Carter Woodson believed when he founded Negro History Week in 1926, for the same reasons, to empower African Americans and to provide a foundation of history from which a community could be built. I felt the same way about LGBT history, and that's why in '94 I sent out the proposal to the then known gay and lesbian world in the USA, saying, hey, let's make this October 1994 the first annual Lesbian and Gay History Month. And I'm pleased that the response was overwhelmingly positive. And I'm thrilled that 27 years later, this is the 28th annual, colleges and universities and secondary schools and community groups are still recognizing October and creating events like this one to highlight the contributions and the history of LGBT people.
It's very admirable. I graduated in '95, and I am, my heart is just bursting to see the change, that's taken place since I was a kid. And, how much more safe the world is, for kids now. And you're very inspiring. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jennifer, very much. Are there others with comments or questions?
This is why I shouldn't be allowed to do
No
things.
comment
Can you hear
or
me?
question off limit. Tracy, yes.
I was still muted again. I have a question in here.
What process did you go through to make the History Month?
What process did you go through to make History Month? That's what she would like to know.
Well, I looked at, of course, the then existing history months like Black History Month in February, Women's History Month in March, and the others that had come to be by 1994. And I wanted to model it on those previous commemorations. In January of '94, I typed up a proposal, why I thought we needed this, how it would work, how we could make it happen. A good friend of mine from college, her name is Jonda Boyce, read the letter, gave her input, and then we sent it out to every group we could think of. Of course, we didn't have email then or internet, anything like this. Some of these existed, email for some people, but I didn't have it personally. So we were using the old-fashioned way. And the key, I felt, was getting endorsements from organizations like the Human Rights Campaign Fund, as it was then called, like the National Task Force, Gay and Lesbian Task Force, like the American Historical Association's Committee on Lesbian and Gay History, like historians who were known already for LGBT history. And we started getting that right away. The idea really took off very quickly. I then organized a coordinating committee. Jonda, my friend, was on it. Kevin Jennings was on it. Kevin Booyer was on it. Jasiah Greenman, Sarah Lynn Chestnut from Atlanta, San Francisco, Chicago, Massachusetts, Ohio, Missouri. So tried to make it geographically diverse. And we put together a packet, small little packet for $5. Anyone could send a contribution to the Gerberhardt Lesbian and Gay Archive and Library in Chicago. And we'd send them a packet of information, things they could do, books they could read, events they could put on, movies they could show, ideas they could bring to their community or academic group. And we also got some proclamations that first year, which was very heartening. Oregon, Connecticut, Massachusetts proclaimed Lesbian and Gay History Month that very first October of '94. And then I always believed the idea would be sort of innate or grassroots, that it would just grow up and everyone would do what they wanted to do. And when I Googled the event in October, as I have been doing the last few weeks, lots of different things that people are doing. So, there's no box into which people must fall in order to do an event. They can do whatever they want. And people are really imaginative and they have all sorts of different ideas and unique perspectives on how to acknowledge October as LGBTQ History Month, how to highlight some of the stories that aren't well known and some of the events that aren't well known and some of the people that aren't well known.
Follow up?
Is there some places that you know of, like states that don't do this celebration?
Are there still states that don't recognize LGBT History Month? And I think it's more recognized amongst like colleges and schools, correct?
Yes. Now, there are localities that issue proclamations, many of those. And there are some states that issue proclamations. This year, Washington, D.C. issued an official proclamation. I would love, though, to get a federal government proclamation, either from the Congress or from the White House. You might remember that our first Pride Month proclamation happened in 1999, so it took almost 30 years. The last year of Clinton's presidency, 99, and then, well, his real last year, 2000, he issued a proclamation for June. The Bush administration did not issue any during that 8-year period, if I'm recalling correctly. The Obama administration did all 8 years, and then the immediate administration prior to the current one did, I think, 1 year after they were cajoled and embarrassed into doing it. And Biden, his first year, did so. I think that would be really helpful and really important, The Equality Caucus of the United States Congress, which is made up of all the openly gay, openly LGBTQ members of Congress, and also those who support the Equality Act, for example. They have done a lot this year on their social media feed in terms of acknowledging LGBTQ History Month. But I'm still hoping eventually we'll get a congressional resolution, proclamation, and or a presidential proclamation. I think that would be really an event for that to happen. But it's just been 28 years, and maybe it'll take a few more, or maybe we'll be surprised and get one by the end of this month or next year.
That's a good point. I don't think, I mean,
Also,
sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's a lot harder for the average age group of a college student today to realize, like, pride was a thing for 30 years before it was recognized. Like, we may see huge celebrations today. We just went, our student club was involved in Metro East Pride on October 2nd. It was huge and there were so many people there, but that's not the way it's always been. It took decades to get to the point where it wasn't constant harassment and stigmatization of those that were involved in those kind of pride parades that we can now celebrate so much. The Stonewall riots and along those lines, the violence that came with just the chance to be able to have a parade like that or a celebration. It's hard for those that weren't around during that time to understand that, you know, that we might be used to hearing about LGBT History Month now. And I'm not going to lie, until I met you, Rodney, early, I think it was last year, I didn't know the history of it. I never really had thought about it. I just celebrated it and, you know, did stuff for the school and things like that. So it's sometimes difficult to wrap our minds around just how long things like that may take to get any kind of recognition. Recognition is a big part.
I'm reminded of a quote of Martin Luther King quoting someone else: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And yes, these things can take a long time. Just consider the fact that right now in Missouri, my home state, we still don't have a statewide protection from housing and employment discrimination. We've been trying to get that through the Missouri General Assembly for 30 years. We also don't have that on the federal level. The Equality Act is there right now. Maybe it'll happen this time, but we've been trying for a long, long time. In terms of marriage equality, that didn't happen until 2015. I was 50 years old, 50, half a century of my life before marriage equality became the law of the land, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling. So yes, unfortunately, no one cedes their power or their privileges quickly or easily. There's always a fight, and there's always a period of time in which slowly opinions change. I wish it weren't that way, but that is the way it is. The good news for today's young people is we've gotten a lot of things done over the last 50 years that they won't have to do. It'll be their job to protect what we've accomplished and to build on what we've accomplished and take it 3 or 4 steps beyond where we are now. And I have confidence in today's young people that they will have the energy and the stamina and the wherewithal and the knowledge to do precisely that. And I'm not close to old age yet, but I will be in 10 or 15 years. And I look forward to seeing where we are in 15 years. And that will be thanks to young people, because most of us who are over 50, while still involved in some way or another, we don't have the same type of energy and stamina that they do. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the young people do produce. And I expect it's going to be a lot, but they have to be vigilant, because history teaches us that you can be in a relatively good or comfortable place and your community can backslide into a place that is not so good and not so comfortable. So we all have to remain vigilant to make certain we don't lose what we've gained and that instead we continue gaining.
Also, to realize that in June of 2020 is the first time where the Supreme Court and federal law changed that you could no longer be fired just for being perceived as gay. And I don't think a lot of people, especially younger people, I don't think a lot of people realize that that was still state law in 27 states. That if they thought somebody was gay, or they thought somebody was trans, or they thought somebody was bi, they didn't have to have any proof. They could just fire them for that and that alone. And it took until just last June, like I said, for that to finally be overturned by the Supreme Court, similarly as we've seen with other laws.
Yep.
Anybody else have any comments or questions, or stare at me? Anybody on Zoom? I could talk all day. Yes.
Was there any students that were particularly like being difficult with him because he was homosexual?
Did you have any students who were like particularly like gave you any problems or were difficult for you because of becoming out as homosexual?
Not particularly. There was one student who spoke with Dateline NBC. You saw a few clips from that 1994 episode, but we did not use any of those clips in this documentary, but she and her father were very unhappy with what had happened, and she claimed in that interview with Dateline NBC that she had lost all her respect for me. This isn't Sarah, who was in the documentary short. Right. This is someone else. And there was one student I remember who became a bit problematic after this happened, and I felt it was in response to this new reality. But generally, and pretty much overwhelmingly, within a year, things went back to normal. I was the teacher, again, not the gay teacher, but the teacher, and they were my students, and we got back to the way things were prior to 1994. That was a testament, I think, to those young people who now I guess would be in their early to mid 40s. So that was a testament to them. And ultimately, even though there was opposition in the community and some people who said very awful, nasty things, generally the community was neutral to supportive, with a small group who were upset, angry, negative, and they would come to the school board meetings. And often it's the squeaky door that gets the oil. And I think that's the case in terms of media as well.
You keep making me feel old, because I would have been the same. I would have been a freshman that year in high school. So.
Right.
I remember that. And the thing that I found like surprising when I first saw this video, because I watched it with PFLAG, for anybody who needs PFLAG, is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, as an organization put together for exactly what it sounds like, for any kind of support, was that you were so close to home. I was, again, 14 at the time when it would have happened. And I don't really recall, at 14, I wasn't watching the news and paying attention to anything, right? If it wasn't directly affecting me. But it was interesting learning that you were right across the river, because I live in Cahokia, so you were right there. Like, wow, this is going on then. And then asking my mom, do you remember this? Oh, I remember that. Okay. Yeah, it was national news, I know, but well, I probably did watch Ricky Lake, I'm not gonna lie. Anybody else have? I have another, there you go. What'd you have?
In the documentary, it says that there were 12 other employees that were also in that community. Did they also get backlash like you, or was it kind of like thrown under the rug after what happened to you?
Did you hear that? Okay, I didn't.
No.
That's why I've been repeating it. I just want to make sure. So in the documentary, it says that there were 12 other members of the faculty that were LGBTQ or more. Did they get the same kind of backlash as you, or did that just kind of come at you because you were the public face? Or
Right. I think what happened with my colleagues, we had known of each other and would occasionally do like a Christmas dinner together. But I was the youngest of the dozen. And I think they were all in their, early 40s through mid 50s. And they felt, and I understand it, they felt I was going too far and pushing too much and trying to make changes too quickly. And I think some of them might have felt too a sense of more exposure, because what I did made it real that there are, in fact, lesbian and gay teachers at the high school. I never confirmed that at the time. I never said anything about anyone else at the time. But I do remember I went to them and said, this is a really important moment. Why don't we contact Newsweek magazine and say, we've got 12 teachers in this one school who are lesbian and gay, and we want to do a story, and everyone's ready to come out and have an even larger national conversation about lesbian and gay teachers. But they did not have any interest whatsoever. They wanted me to succeed, of course. They wanted me to do well, but they were also watching to see, because if I had been let go, they would have retreated even more into a don't ask, don't tell type of situation.
Makes sense, yeah. Did that answer your question? Anybody else? Yes. Ah, that's a good question. Was the publicity distracting to teaching?
Not really, because I was able to sort of separate what I was supposed to be doing from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and what I would be doing after 3 o'clock. So I did my best to go back to being just a teacher, having the same requirements of students, presenting the same material. So I don't think it affected my teaching or the effectiveness of the classroom or of my instruction. It might have enhanced it in some way, because students now had some additional information about me that might have actually, I think, enriched the rapport and the communication in the classroom. But I did my best to just be teacher and make certain they were students.
Good question. Very good question. Yes. Did parents try to pull kids out of your class whenever they found out?
As far as I know, not one parent went to administration at any point and asked that a student be removed, or in the 5th, 6th, and 7th years that I taught there, that they be unenrolled from my class even before the semester or the school year started. As far as I know, not one, which also I think speaks to some basic goodwill that I had developed in the community and that parents were honoring.
Interesting. Anybody on Zoom or? My phone's
Any other questions from Zoom or there in your room?
I just posted, or Victoria actually just posted the YouTube link, because a few people in chat asked for the YouTube link of the movie that we just watched.
Okay.
Just wanted to know it was there. No, any closing comments? No. I want to thank you for spending time with us today, because I find it so fascinating. That's why when I first met you, I was like, oh, we're gonna have to figure something out, because it's amazing to see the changes. Even again, it's hard to even, the differences between 1994 and today, and acceptance. And it doesn't mean everybody, of course, but a larger group, a larger society. Yeah, in just that time period. Oh, we have a hand raised.
Thank you. Oh, okay.
In Zoom. Mackenzie, can
Mackenzie.
you talk or do I need to? Yep, you can talk. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to know, what were your main coping mechanisms during the time? And also, who surprisingly gave you support?
Nice question.
Great questions. I don't think I recognized at the time how stressful the situation was, because I was 29, and at 29, almost everything's easier. When I went back about 5 years ago and finally dug out the videotapes that I had recorded from the television of various appearances in the news and rewatched them in order to digitize them, and they're all available at my YouTube page, which there's a link there. I actually felt a little bit of what I guess would be described as post-traumatic stress that I wasn't even aware I was carrying around for all of those years. So I guess I coped by not letting it bother me, by trying to just be regular teacher, regular colleague. I did have good friends, though, who provided any support I would have needed or listened to anything I had to say. So that's very helpful. In terms of the support, the most surprise, I think I was surprised generally by the fact that overwhelmingly students and community members were neutral to receptive. I didn't think it would be, for all of the negativity that did come, I didn't think that overwhelmingly I would be faced with neutrality to acceptance. So I guess that would be the biggest surprise I had, not an individual, but the community as a whole, and their general neutrality or acceptance. All right, anyone else? One final question from anyone? All right, Tracy, I thank you for this invitation. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in via Zoom and everyone who's there live in your classroom. I really enjoyed this, and I wish everyone well. And I'm very thankful that you put this together to do one more thing in one more location in honor of the 28th annual LGBTQ plus History Month. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Stop.